Good morning. It's Thursday and welcome to Saba's Way of Life, which today is in the kitchen. So we're going back to food because I just want to share what I've been doing in the kitchen this morning. I have a friend and her children coming over a bit later, and so this was an ideal opportunity for me to cook a few things. I did some cooking yesterday, which I shared with you, and I cooked a few more things last night and today, which means that they will be able to be used over the weekend with family and of course today later on. So the first thing I want to show you, and of course when I'm showing you all of this, it's all about the thinking behind it. So you know all of this, but I just want to give you that confidence. So let me just turn this around. Right, here is a chocolate walnut cake. Now, the first thing to bear in mind is that I was up early, not in any rush, just up early. And I thought to myself, you know what, let me just start the cooking process. So the first thing I did was get one of my cookbooks out. This is one of my favorites for cakes. And I sat down with my cup of tea and I had a good look at the recipe. I read it through 2 or 3 times. Now, I want to point out here that for those of you who are used to making cakes, you'd understand this. Those of you who are not and who are afraid of cooking, what you've got to understand is that you've got to just start with a simple cake. And if you're saying, well, it never works for me, then there's something in your thinking that isn't right. So I'm going to give you an example of what I mean by this. When you're beating the butter and sugar together until light and fluffy, think about when you cook that cake the first time, think about what that's doing to the texture. Now, you're not going to know the first time, but the second, the third, the fourth, you'll get an idea when the recipe says beat together until light and fluffy, or beat together for at least 10 minutes until the whisk forms strings for 3 seconds. And so for me, when I learn, I'm not going to go to a chemistry class to understand the science behind it. Do you think cooks did that? Mothers did that for the hundreds of years that they've been cooking? They innately understood. First of all, it was passed down from their grandparents and parents and down, because that's just the way it was done. We're living in a society today where the kids don't really care. They can get it all outside and they're just not interested in being in the kitchen. And that's a shame, and that's going to come and bite them. It already is, with all the diseases and people dying far earlier. So that's less likely to happen if you're cooking at home. So when you're cooking, you're thinking in your mind, well, okay, why am I beating this together? How was the texture of the cake? When the cake calls for milk, if it's warm milk or if it's cold milk, what difference does that make to the texture? And believe me, it does. These are the things that you need to be thinking about when you're cooking, which is why I'm always repeating in videos that, especially with food, don't do it with noise in the background, and be on your own if you can. Or if you have a sous chef or a child watching you, somebody watching you, then ask them just to observe until they've got an idea, and then they can be helpful by measuring things out and so on. But observation the first few times is the most important thing. So that way I'm completely focused and I remember. So an example with this cake, which is a beautiful cake, it's got this gorgeous, again, you might think, oh, it's sugar, but it's homemade. There's no chemicals in it, and I put my heart into it. As always, I put a little bit less sugar in, so it's not overly sweet. And most homemade cakes you find when you use old-fashioned recipe books, they don't call for a lot of sugar. But in this particular cake, because you've got a lot of walnuts in it, it asked me to beat the butter and sugar for a long time until it was really light and really fluffy. And it wasn't self-raising flour at all, which self-raising flour is one that in the UK you can buy, which rises naturally. Other flours, you use plain flour and you would add baking powder to it. None of that is in there. But I understood from the whisking, it would rise a little bit anyway because it would be much lighter. I'm even thinking next time I might try it with self-raising flour and still beat it and see what happens. I like to experiment, but it's come out very, very, very well. It's quite dense inside, even though I've beaten it quite well. That's what I'm trying to explain to you about the cooking process. Be focused, think about what you're doing, and keep practicing. I've got to understand my oven. When the recipe calls for 180 degrees, I know on my fan assisted oven it's 100 and it's 20 degrees lower, 160. So you get to understand. Now, the other thing I want to show you is a few things I've done. Look at this wonderful loaf of bread. You might remember I made bread before, some milk bread, and I always have an issue with the bread rising. Well, I don't give up. And this is a simple bread. Just want to say I did spend about 6 months on the trot cooking sourdough and perfecting it. But there's a lot of effort involved. And I had so many other priorities at that time with my study and so on that I didn't continue with that. But I've done it. So I understand to some degree how good bread is made. But this is just a simple loaf of bread, which I picked up from a recipe online. I looked at my mother's recipe as well. They were both very similar, and there were a few tips I remembered in the video that I watched, which reminded me I've really got to make sure I work the gluten. And look at this. I mean, I'm so happy. It's nice and soft. It's just like bread from the shops, but obviously it's homemade and it's much better. It's light. It's fluffy, it's great toasted. I did cheat and have a piece of toast this morning. When I say cheat, nothing wrong with having a piece of toast, is that I don't normally eat until 10 o'clock, but the smell was just amazing. So I did toast, lots of butter, and it was lovely. So again, that's practice. And I made 2 of them, and the second one was huge. It rose really well yesterday, and I took that over to my parents because they'd just run out of bread. And my mother was saying she was just going to bake today. And I said, you don't need to. I've done one for you. How good does that feel? She's actually fasting the whole month of Ramadan. So she's she's a strong woman. My mother is a woman and a half. In her, how old is she now? 78, 79. Her knees have gone. She's had all sorts of diseases and illnesses and come through them. Again, stress of life and maybe not eating the right foods because she trusted the system and what the system told her about cholesterol and so on. It's all nonsense. I can talk about that another time. But the point is she's got this will in her. She's not lazy. And if she can do something herself, she will. And I've got that, the spirit I've got from my mum and dad. They don't make them like that anymore. Literally wispy, they use the word snowflakes, but it's worse than snow, because snowflakes are quite nice and pretty, but they're not. They're just wispy pieces of shell that you, and then they start crying. That's what you've got in human beings today, which are cyborgs or humanoids. Weak. They've no substance anymore. So, digressing, as always, it's very important with my videos. I digress all the time so that you when you're watching all the videos, it's like a story and you pick up something from each video. Do watch them again. Go back and sometimes I watch my own videos because I remind myself of things that I've learned or read. And it's when you've got good information, and I give very good information, which comes from experience in life and a way of life, then it's something worth listening to and taking note of and putting into action in your own life. It's a long story for me to share with you on how this change happened. Anyway, so that's the bread. And then the last thing I'm making are, we call them Pakora. It's also known in England as onion bhajis, but the real name is Pakora. So I just wanted to made with chickpea flour, and I had some chickpea flour, which is known as besan, and there's so many different ways of making this. So what I've done is just taken some chickpea flour, I've put different types of spices in there, like chili powder, like hand crushed coriander seeds, fenugreek, ajwain, ginger, and a few others. And then I've chopped up over here all the ingredients. See how organised I am here. This is important. I did it this morning very calmly. Here you've got coriander leaves, which I've chopped up, green chilies chopped up. And then I'm going to make them with onions and potatoes. So I've got onions and I've grated some potatoes here. Can you see them? And all I'm doing is just extracting the water from them. And over here, this is incidentally, I just want to show you, this is homemade ghee. I've got another big batch here, and I do need to cook up another batch soon because we get through a lot in the house. What's this fly doing there? So, and finally here, yesterday I took some chickpeas, raw chickpeas, and I soaked them overnight. So these have been soaking for 24 hours now, and this will be for tomorrow or something, and I'll cook these and I'll share with you what I've done. Now, the other thing I want to share with you, you know, you watch all these YouTube videos on cooks and everything's so clean and tidy. When you are cooking in your kitchen, it is never going to be clean and tidy unless you've got some sort of a slave that works for you and that cleans up after you. And many people do, and they have helpers that work, and that's great. But there is nothing as satisfying as doing it yourself. Really. Or first do it yourself for a number of years and then have the help. My mum, we are her sous chefs. We help around her, but she just wants to be left on her own. And you will be amazed. I can't do this. She'll cook a meal for 12, 13 people, and her kitchen will be just immaculate. Like she'll cleaning up as she goes along. I don't know how she does it. I can't do that. The way I do it is lay out all the ingredients. I do that perfectly, cook the meal, and then I set about washing up the dishes. At the end of the day, who cares? As long as you do it, that's the main thing. So it's a proper cook's kitchen is never clean and tidy. I can promise you. I'll be scrubbing the floor a little bit later and tidying up downstairs in the house. I'm trying to think, was there anything else I wanted to share with you today? But that's it. That's what I want to share with you. I am expecting all of you to get into your kitchen and start cooking. You really must. I don't remember the last time I bought anything to eat from outside. Just imagine what that does to the cells of your body when it's all home cooked, even if it's bread, even if it's a cake. The difference is night and day. We all focus on sugar, sugar, sugar. No. Yes, too much sugar is not good. Focus on cooking at home first and cook wonderful food at home. And then as you start doing that, you'll feel more nourished because you'll be using the right ingredients that nourish you, and your body will automatically not want too much sugar. Focus on community, building community. When you cook, people want to come and eat. I wish I had all this knowledge when I was younger and my children were growing up, because it was work, work, work. We were servants of the state, and they used to come home from school and no one was there. Oh, there'd be a nanny or pair there. Wrong. Do it this way. So same with my parents. They were working all the time. That is living in a slave state, which is worldwide now. And that's what we need to change. So the more you bring community in, the more love there is, the more you're sharing. So you're cooking, you're sharing, you're cooking, you're sharing, they're eating, they help you, they bring something in. It's a two-way energy exchange, and it's a wonderful way of life. It isn't around today, but you can change it wherever you are. It starts with you. So get in the kitchen, get in the garden, get reading, and start to build back a kind of medieval, remember how you take that word, a medieval life where people matter, community matters, and children matter. Okay, have a good day.